Alrighty, welcome back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. So this one, I wanted to cover a little bit of a motherboard issue that I've been seeing. Let me see if I got my motherboard over here. My end of year video is on. Mention this, that I'm going to cover this subject. Again, it's motherboards. I know I have a video on this, but this is where it's really leading me to the issue of my quiz for 2022 of the frequency on your CPU. Running into a lot of weird issues with computers. Lots and lots of them. In that video I've mentioned 6 computers. I'm probably up to 30 or 40 computers with this issue. And how would I word it? I would call them ghost in the machine issues. Because it's not the same on every system. Used to find this with mixed-matched memory. Different memory size, different memory speeds, even different brands of memory. You would have just weird random things. Oh, it just won't open Internet Explorer. Oh, Firefox won't work. Oh, you can't defrag a hard drive. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you can't do that. Just weird stuff. But the other one next to it, same make, same model, everything, works fine. Been running into that issue big time. And that's because I believe these boards are become pretty much generic. In the old days, depending on what you wanted to run in your computer, that's the kind of motherboard you needed to get. You wanted to run an i5? You want to run an i7? They were usually not the same motherboard. They were different motherboards you had to buy that would support that. Chipsets were different. Nowadays, a lot of it is one chipset that covers Celeron, i3, i5s, i7s, i9s in that socket. As long as the socket matched, it looks like most of them will support whatever CPU you want to put in. Memory speeds. I remember looking at them. I want an i5. I want 133 megahertz memory. Well, that motherboard only supported 133 or like 166 or 188 or whatever the clock speeds were. That was it. Not like today. You go out and buy the DDR4 at 2700 or 5500 or whatever speed in between. No, the old days you could not do that. So I'm believing that's where this issue is coming from, is due to that universal design. What the frequency of the CPU is, I still have not quite figured out. What is actually running that the frequency is so high? And it's not the CPU use. And if you watch the video, I show you where to see that. What graphic will show you that. And I only find it in one place. And I've done research online, and there ain't a whole lot of talk about it. But when I drop the power usage from 100% to 99% on CPU, it automatically drops that frequency below 100%. And all those little ghosts in the machines, all those little errors go away. How that really makes a difference in the motherboard in the BIOS, in the power frequencies. Not actually too sure, because I'm not a motherboard designer. What they've changed over those years and how that change has taken effect is really an interesting thing. What's really interesting is how you could be running a 2%, 4% usage on CPU, but have a frequency of 130 some percent. That kind of blew my mind. So I have to do more research on that, but I wanted to cover that on the motherboard itself because that is something that has changed a lot in the 30 plus years that I've been doing this. Of course, I've mentioned in all my other videos, the memory has changed. From Sims, DIMMs, DDR, DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5, and probably DDR6 right around the corner. Of course, the memory's changed. How much power those CPUs and everything use has changed. Power connectors that actually attach to the motherboard have changed. I know I've covered some of this. A lot of boards still have 2 to 3 different connectors for power. This one should be for your CPU. That's all just for your CPU. This is for your motherboard that covers a lot of other things. Of course, connectors have changed. Slots have changed. How many slots? Where they're located. Of course, you don't have this no more. You don't really have... Well, you have this on servers and some other end processors and some other things. You still have it. This one's a pretty hard one to find too. Questionable. New system we just bought. Pretty funny. HDMI out, but still has the old connectors. So how do you hook that to a switch unit where you have multiple units hooked up on one monitor so you could switch between computers? It doesn't have that port. That and those go together. Has a display ports out. Kind of an interesting combination. Talked about that on manufacturers doing kind of whatever they want nowadays, not following best standard practice. One of those little factors I wanted to point out with this video, because really, how do you use those two together? Why would you want to use them together? Okay, if you're a gamer, that makes sense. Because theoretically, these should perform better than USB. That's why you still see some of these out there. I've done videos on this. Why these are coming back. Go back, watch those videos. Because they're dedicated to the board, not shared with the USB. So if you have a newer switch box with the newer videos, you're coming out of USB with your HDMI or whatever digital inputs. That's not even digital. I'll get to that one. I don't know if anybody recognizes that or not, but you'd have to be probably around for a while to recognize that. That one is probably more recognizable to some people because it's still kind of used on some things. The serial port. Printer port. There's a difference there. Audio. That is another one that's really changed a lot. I remember getting some boards that had 9 of those. Nowadays, a lot of them have one single jack that uses either in for your mic or out for your headset. That little one I have here, that's the way it's set up. Because you usually don't use both. Or if you do, you're using USB now. So there's some factors that have changed big time over motherboards that I really wanted to go through again. And of course, you have your hard drives. IED, SATA, M.2. And I can't forget the old-fashioned little boy that nobody probably ever really used much of. Anybody know? Your floppy. You got your SATAs. Things have changed over the years. Heat sinks. I remember bought boards, the only heatsink you had was on your CPU. That was something that is coming up more and more because of the performance and all of that. Batteries. There has been a couple different style batteries. There's been soldered on batteries. There's been the ones that have been removed. And there's been ones that would basically connect with the pin and had a little cable to it. But this has pretty much been the standard pretty much out there. Old computers, 386, 486, pretty much had the soldered on batteries. So there have been changes on a lot of things that have gone on. Different port. That one, I believe, is the floppy. But there have been other ports that have come out that have failed, that really didn't take off. Video card port, different ports. Reason why I kept this board around is really because it had so many of those variables. This board, when it came out, I got it from a different computer that was scrapped and destroyed, that I was kind of really shocked. This one is one of the ones that were out right in the transition period between everything. So you can see how you have everything. The old with the new. Old with the new. You know, the old with the new. It was really a good training point for me. So I kept it to show everybody how things have really changed to go through. And because it's now the end of 2022 and everybody is getting ready and everybody has hopefully started their changes over to Windows 11, a lot of this is obsolete. A lot of it's going to be obsolete. But when you get into servers and you get into some of those other things, those other factors, some of this stuff is still kind of there. You don't really deal with it a lot unless you're setting up a server and you're putting in your hardware and you're getting things ready to go, that you run into these things. So it's kind of an interesting thing to go back and look at and to go over what has changed and where it has gone. Now that we're running all these newer kind of platforms, the systems that I've been having an issue with are kind of the generation after this. The ones that are going to be pretty much going out with Windows 11. I've actually had some new systems have the same issue as the old systems. So I know it's not like a motherboard generational issue, because this is new systems that just came in that still have that issue with the CPU frequency. If it's the actual OS, or if it's the motherboard itself that's generating that issue, is the whole problem. But knowing how a CPU and motherboard and all that is designed and set up and where it's at, this helps you out to troubleshoot some of these issues. When I talk about how many sockets you have, how many channels you have, memory channels. I don't know if anybody can tell me how many memory channels this has and what order the memory is in. It's pretty self-explanatory. But if you go back and watch some of those videos, it'll explain the differences and how you set them up and why. But you have two different color connectors. Most motherboards will actually be marked on the motherboard 1, 2, 3, and 4 to tell you where the memory needs to go. If not, you have to find the manual and find out which ones are the primary, which ones are secondary. Some motherboards don't even care if you put it in the white or the black. Some of them are blue and black. Some of them are red. But it's basically the same. The colors match. You want to match your matching sticks in all 4 of those slots. I've also mentioned gaming boards will not have 4. They'll have just the 2 slots. Usually they're associated pretty close to the CPU, so it has less travel time between and less interference and other factors that come into apply. So this is one of the things that I wanted to show again, because I know I don't cover a lot of gaming. I don't cover a lot of high-end stuff right now, but I might. But if you're looking at buying a system for home use / gaming / whatever, these are some of those factors you might want to look at. You might want to be aware of. Most companies, when you go to look at buying a computer, they'll have the specifications of the motherboard. And again, you're a home user, you don't understand that. Okay, there's 4 slots of DDR5. What's that mean? There's 4 slots. So these are some of these factors I wanted to cover again. And again, I understand a lot of this is pretty complex, pretty confusing. So that's why I kind of do more videos covering a lot of the same subject in different ways and different content so you can understand. I know I've gone through and done the power supply and showed the connectors and showed a lot of things and showed, you hook it to a hard drive, you hook this, you hook that. But this is really one of the main factors that you need to consider nowadays. Because if you truly want a fast PC and you want an M.2 drive, you don't want to be plugging your M.2 drive into the port and adding an add-on card. They're much better if they're on the board. So you can actually attach it to the board. It'll clip in there. It has a little screw. And it's on the actual motherboard. So there are things to be aware of. Because I can sell you the computer with this motherboard with an M.2 in it. Let me ask you, is this going to be worth you spending your money? This is an old design board. I can throw a CPU in there that's compatible, that's really old, put in an M.2, put in a SATA. I have the SATA drives. There's adapters. I can adapt an M.2 into the SATA port. Again, go back and watch those videos. I can do that with this board. There's reasons why you don't want to do that. Number one, SATA cannot support the full speed of that M.2. Again, goes back to mentioning, you can buy things nowadays that are way above what you actually need. So now you have a fast drive hooked to a slow connection on a slow motherboard on a slow processor, on slow memory. Well, that doesn't get you very far. You could have just bought a cheap SATA drive in there and been just as good. So that's why I wanted to show the motherboard again. Because this is where it all really starts, knowing what is in there. I remember building computers, going to conferences. Certain manufacturers were very upset at certain companies because they would put their own generic board in there, put in their CPU and a good style memory, and the computer would not run well, would not function well, and they blamed it on the CPU. I remember that was a big debate. And it all falls down on these. Of course, a lot of these companies have gotten better at manufacturing motherboards and all of that, because I don't believe they actually manufacture them anymore. Like TVs. How many TV manufacturer companies are there? Where are they made? I know a lot of people go, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of TV companies out. No. Who is actually making this that goes into the back of the TV? That's who's making your TV. This is what controls your computer. This is what would control a TV. Whatever other little tinkets are added on, this is what controls. How many true manufacturing plants are there of motherboards? Of anything. If you're out there buying stuff online and other things and you find something that looks the same as something else, little adapters for cell phones to change cables. How many true manufacturers are manufacturing this thing? There might be 100 of these online with 100 different names on them, but who actually manufactured this? Who actually manufactured the board that is connected from that little end that converts into that? Who manufactured those chips? All these dies. Who manufactured all these? And then they put them on there. There's only a few companies out there. If you know about the chip shortage and you know about all of this, that's why a lot of places got affected. There's not a whole lot of manufacturers of these things. And you might have 4 or 5 manufacturers of motherboards in the world. But they're all waiting for this one little component, or they're all waiting for this little one component. It's the same component. So, wanted to go through that and actually show the motherboard and understand what a motherboard is. Control board, whatever you want to call it. And these smart TVs and all of that stuff. There's these boards in there that have memory and have all this stuff that you plug your USB in, you plug your HDMI lines in that run out. So it's all video displays and stuff that are on boards. So I wanted to touch base on that so people understand the computer motherboard. To understand how it's kind of changed, what's changed. And to be aware of these things, because maybe you have an older computer that does not have this issue, and you buy a new computer and you start having this issue. Just weird stuff happening. With the video that I have posted, go back and watch that. Pay attention and see what I'm showing you. See where you look. When you buy that new computer, fire it up. Go right on over there and see, is your computer doing the same thing? Do you need to adjust that? Adjust that, and then you know you don't have that problem. But this is where it's all leading me to, is the motherboard manufacturing. Because if this motherboard and this socket can support an i9, and the chipset and everything else can support the i9 speeds, it can overfeed your i3 processor. And that could cause it to run higher than what the specs are. Changing that little setting resolves all that. All the problems go away. And I wanted to touch base on that so people are aware, because I don't think a lot of people realize the sockets are pretty much the same. You can put whatever you want kind of in a motherboard. Knowing it and making sure that that board actually supports it is still a very important thing today. I don't think a lot of people actually do. They just go out and buy what they want. Oh yeah, that'll work, that'll work, that'll work, that'll work. That's why there's certain companies out there that actually say, pick your parts you want and we will build your computer for you. I don't know the exact business names. I don't want to really state them on my video anyways. But this is where these little issues, I believe, are coming from. How do you know what this motherboard is actually set up and designed for? You buy a pre-made computer with a generic board from the certain company in there with that CPU, that memory. What does that board actually support? So these are some of those little issues that I've seen that I wanted to bring up. And this is what it's leading me to. And the changes over all these years that I don't remember ever seeing that problem. Maybe this is a problem that's gone on for a long time, but we haven't had the speeds or the bandwidths or anything else in the system to cause these errors to come up. Now that everything's so much faster, maybe that's generating the compounded the issue. So that's why I wanted to state this, go through the motherboard again, go through and show some of the changes. Because if you're buying a new computer nowadays, you're not probably going to see this. It's rare, but you can find them. Doubt you're going to see that. I know you're not going to see that because I don't even know if you can get a printer or anything that even takes that anymore. Those are pretty rare. And again, usually these and these go together. Again, now the one we bought, for some weird reason, had that, but didn't have that. I kind of thought that was kind of a weird issue. It had an add-on card. It had 2 DisplayPort, an additional HDMI on the motherboard, and then it had a video card with 4 ports out. Oh, you know what? I'm going to change that video card out. I know it's a very good video card, but if we're going to be running this, there's no reason to downgrade from 1080 4K video all the way down to this when I could just put in a video card that supports that. To me, I thought that was silly. So this is where the buyer beware comes in again. If you're running old tech like this, for whatever reason, have a switch box, you have 4 computers on it, it's a server, it's a virtual server, it's whatever you want out of it. Go watch those videos on the server. What's a server, what's not a server? Depending on what you need, how you need it, that's your server. If you need a certain interface, you need a certain connection, if you need these 2, And this, well, and it's not available on a server grade, but it's available on a workstation grade. And you get an i9, you get DDR5, you get, all this factors on there. Well, it might be worth it. If you don't need, a terabyte of memory, you just need a decent amount of memory to do what you need to, you can get away with that. That would be your server. That's when that video came in. What's a server? What's not a server? Go back and watch that, because that goes back to some of these factors. I brought it up on that video. What's on the back? What's different? How is it integrated? What is it? What are you doing with it? So a lot of these factors come into play. So that's why I wanted to touch base on the motherboard, because a lot of people I know, they're like, it doesn't matter, just add a card. It does matter. It really does matter. Because now you're having add-on cards that draw power from your board, and it does other things. You have heat issues, you have other factors that come into play. Not to mention, depending on the case. I have the video on this little tiny unit I got on my desk. It has everything I need. I don't need to put in my full server tower that I actually have down here. I have a full server tower, an old one. I can use that if I needed to. But I don't need that unit, that big of a unit, for what I'm doing. Not to mention, this CPU, the generation that it is now, is so strong and so fast, it dwarfs that. And that's a Celeron. Pretty much one of the lowest grade processors you can get. But it's got an M.2 drive on it and DDR4. So that makes a whole difference between this and that. So knowing what peripherals and what connections you're going to need is a factor on a motherboard. And again, knowing what you can add to it. Some of them actually have ports you can add your front USB. If you have a case that has front USB, front audio, front video, they attach to the motherboard itself. A lot of those video cards, you cannot support anything other than those videos out the back unless you plug in and reroute it through. So knowing these factors is where the motherboard is more helpful to know what you're getting. What else is on the front? Firewire. If you want to firewire ports. If you want generic card reader. The ones we have just the standard card reader port for your camera cards and all of that type of stuff. The SD cards. All of that usually connects to the motherboard. Knowing what's on the motherboard and what ports and what it supports really helps you out in the future. So I know a lot of people just add an add-on card, But then you got to have a long board because you're going to have all these add-on cards. It means you're going to have a long, tall case. That means you're going to have a lot of things to support that. So knowing what's on the motherboard can solve you a lot of issues. So I think I've gone on long enough with the motherboard and how this issue has developed over the years. And you can see from this one how this one's got a lot of older ports with the newer ports and how it's kind of a blend. Of course, it doesn't have all the brand new modern ports because I need another board from a generational transfer between this and that. And I don't have one of those. So, again, that's the motherboard. That is really a crucial point. information, it goes to your drive. That's the other crucial point. But as for the hard drive, I think I will wrap that one up because I've gone on long enough. I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe. Again, forward all those emails I send out, all the shares, all the Facebook posts. Share those. Send them to friends. Send them to people that you may think might need to know this information. And thank you all for watching.